program that our department is putting together. We really want to share that our department is very motivated to meaningfully engage with tribes and see how we can support. Part of this was solidified and supported through passage of a bill called AB 1010, which was in 2019. And it did a couple things to our programs. It explicitly made tribal governments and tribally designated housing entities eligible applicants to our programs. And it's given HCD the authority to modify our program requirements to support tribal participation in our programs, where the structure of tribal governments may differ from us working with local jurisdictions. And it also is restarting a California Indian Assistance Program, which our department will provide TA to tribes to help with planning and developing of housing. So we're in the process. We've just hired another staff member who I believe is joining us today. And we've been really committed to supporting and working with tribes through our programs. We've recently been successful in awarding 3 tribes through our Home Key program and 1 through our Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities program. And we currently have a CDBG CARES Act funding available with technical assistance conferences with tribes. So with that, I would like to invite Mariah to also welcome as our co-host and welcome you to this session.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mariah McGill, and I work as the Housing Development Construction Manager with Northern Circle Indian Housing Authority. Before we get started, I really just want to thank Tani and the team at HCD for really putting in the work to make this partnership so strong. AB 1010 really made it so that there's fluid communication, and we have been so successful in creating a partnership where communication is fluid back and forth. We're able to problem solve, and we're really, really looking forward to the opportunities that lie ahead for tribes and TDHEs. And I'm really happy that we were able to help facilitate this discussion today. And I hope that we can get a lot of communication and honesty between tribes, TDHEs, HCD, and LIS. Again, thank you for your attendance, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Mariah. Jessica, would you like to get us started?
Sure thing. So my name is Jessica Hayes. I am also with HCD. I am the federal program specialist, one of 2, that works on the different federal funding resources and the different federal programs that the state of California manages. Francisco, you want to take us to slide 2? So a little bit about the goals of this listening session. We want to describe what HCD is going to be deploying in terms of a statewide program to help make sure that folks are informed and they can understand what all of the different players are. We've seen quite a bit of emergency money come out over the last year, and it's not always been really clearly coordinated. So we're really trying to work together and do a better job of making sure that we're clear with our messaging, and our partners know what we're doing, and we know what they're doing to help make sure we coordinate more closely. We also want to provide information specifically to tribes who may have applied for funding from the U.S. Treasury about different opportunities to help them manage their programs. We know everyone is at capacity right now, and that capacity challenges are universal. I mean, we're dealing with some of the state ourselves. So, recognizing that capacity is really a major challenge for a lot of us, looking for opportunities to leverage each other's work, it really makes sense. And so we really want to offer an opportunity for some of that capacity building and that leveraging for folks who feel like it might be helpful for them as they deploy their programs. And then really, this is part of an ongoing effort for us to do, to really listen and learn more about what tribes are facing and how things work in tribal organizations to help us do a better job of kind of tailoring and structuring our programs to be more effective. So, this is, I think a lot of you have maybe seen some of us before. This is part of kind of the series of work that we're doing with our different programs to help make sure that we are collecting information and really getting good feedback so that as we work on our programs, we can do so responsibly. So I think, Francisca, you want to pop to the next slide? Tony, do you want to do introductions real quick? Oh, I'm sorry, this is the agenda, my bad. So we've been bouncing from meeting to meeting today, so I'm a little bit jet lagged. So really our agenda of today, we're going to go through some introductions. We'll introduce kind of who our different partners are so you can get a feel for who we are, and we definitely want to know who's on the call listening with us also. Again, as Francisco mentioned, our intent is to record this. However, if that's not something that you feel comfortable with, do not hesitate to let us know. We're totally okay with that. It just helps us to make sure that we are able to go back and hear what was said and capture information later. So we're going to give a really high-level ERAP program overview. We are happy to go into the weeds a little bit if folks would like to, but it's a lot of information, and we are, as much as we want to make sure we impart information, we're just as interested in making sure we collect information back from you. So we want to give everybody a chance to speak. We'll be talking about our program implementation goals and our timeline. And then the key program requirements, and many of these requirements are from at the federal level, right? So they're not unique to the state, and they're not unique to tribes. They're requirements that we all kind of have to deal with. And so talking about where we might have leveraging and opportunities there. And then we'll be talking a little bit about our partner network, and you'll get to meet Tanua and Dion with the LISC team to talk about what they're doing and how that works. And then we'll have ongoing sharing and questions. That is not to say you can't ask questions as we go. Sometimes it's easier to have a Q&A kind of as we're at that point in the conversation. So if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat box or raise your hand, and we'd be happy to take that question and do that dialogue as we're going through the presentation. Okay, now we're ready for the next slide.
Thank you, Jessica. So we'd like to start with introductions of who's in the room. If you could tell us your name, well, I'll say your name, but if you want to restate your name, your role, the organization you're with, you can share with us if your tribe is federally recognized or not, or I guess maybe this question is less pertinent here. But if you'd also like to share what you'd like to get out of the session, or if you have some insights, please do share that while you're introducing yourself. So I'll just go down the list. We have an Alicia T. If you'd like to unmute and introduce yourself. You also have the option to, if you have audio challenges, you're welcome to put it in the chat.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. My name is Alicia Tolelo, and I'm the housing coordinator for Pinoleville Pomo Nation.
Pleasure to meet you.
As well.
Alicia Scott. If you'd like to unmute and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Alicia Scott. I just got hired on by the Yurok Indian Housing Authority to help with the emergency pandemic assistance.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Arun Balakrishnan. If you'd like to unmute. Or again, there's the option to...
I'll go ahead and jump in for Arun. He's on our project management team, and he's one of the folks who are with us to help take notes and make sure that we accurately capture all of the information that you guys share with us. So he's been really helpful as we've been putting together the different frames for this. Hi, Arun.
Thank you, Jessica. Trying to unmute here.
Great. Christina Heredia. Okay. Dion Roberts.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Dion Roberts with TDA Consulting. I am part of LISC's team on the project management for the ground game and community outreach.
Thank you. Hank Chen.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hank Chen. I'm part of the HCD ERAP program team.
Thank you. We have a couple iPhones, so if I miss you, we can come back at the end. Jamie Covarrubia.
Hi, this is Jaime Covarrubia, chairman for Manchester Band of Pomo Indians. Just trying to get a fill out for the program. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Kayla Sanfilippo.
Hi, I'm the grant writer for Bear River Band of the Runnerville Rancheria, and yes, we're federally recognized.
Thanks for joining us, Kayla. Linda Lawson.
Hi, I'm with the Manchester Band of Pomo Indians, and I'm here with Tribal Treasurer Lydia Aguayo. We're having some trouble getting on, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully, maybe Francisco, if you want to message them. Mary C.
My name is Mary Camp. I'm the tribal administrator for the Redwood Valley Band of Pomo Indians. I also handle the housing. We're part of Northern Circle, but we do have some tribally owned and operated homes. Hi, Rob. Oh.
Thank you, Mary. We have a Melissa Comp.
Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Kopf. I'm with Lake County Behavioral Health Services. We are the administrative entity for the Lake County Continuum of Care, and I am the senior analyst for our team.
Thank you for joining. Nicole Sager.
Hi, I'm Nicole Sager. I'm the executive director with the Yurok Indian Housing Authority. Yurok is federally recognized, and we are here today. There's a few of us on the call to just figure out what type of role the state is playing with this program and how this is all working.
Thank you for joining and your team. We have QVIR Chairwoman Super.
Aiki. My name is Kayla Super, and I am the chairwoman for Quartz Valley Indian Reservation, and we are federally recognized. And I'm also the administrative assistant who will help process the application. So I'm kind of here for like the guidelines of the assistance that we received.
Thank you so much for joining us. We have an R. Dowd.
Hello, can you hear me? This is Rachel Dowd. I am the Program Operations Director with the Yurok Indian Housing Authority. I have some staff on also. Tashina Nat is our Program Specialist, and Shantae Scott is also a Program Specialist. And then Alicia Scott is also on the call, and I believe she introduced herself a little bit ago. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Rob Weiner.
Good afternoon, Rob Weiner, Director, California Coalition for Rural Housing. We're a statewide association of nonprofit, public, and tribal housing organizations working in rural areas of California.
Thank you, Rob. Shannon Tolar.
Hi, my name is Shannon Toller. I work for Current Behavioral Health and Recovery Service as the Homeless Outreach Program. And just we have some partners that are tribal. Just trying to see what we have that might be available for them.
Thank you for doing that. Shantae.
Shantae Scott, Program Specialist for the Yurok Indian Housing Authority.
well represented. Thank you for joining us. Sylvia Bernal.
Hi, this is Sylvia Bernal. I just joined. I'm a realtor. I just joined. I just want to see what the program's about and see if there's anything that I can help while I'm out in the field. And if I, come across anybody where I can just refer and help people. I just wanted to see what it's about.
I have a T-Net. Okay. And then there's a couple folks with phone numbers or iPhones, so apologies if I missed you. If you'd like to introduce yourself, you're welcome to unmute now.
Hello, my name is Jacqueline McDonald. I am the Executive Director of the Chemehuevi Indian Tribe.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, I'm Janice Navarez. I'm a board commissioner for Northern Circle Indian Housing Authority, and my tribe is Redwood Valley Reservation.
Pleasure to meet you.
Same here.
This is Debbie Harper, and Christina Heredia was having problems with her microphone, so I let her know that I would introduce her to the group. It's Christina Heredia, and she is a referral specialist with Sacramento Steps Forward. She works with SHRA, DHA, hospitals, SACPD, and other providers to house homeless.
Thanks for doing that, Debbie. Anyone else? All right, well, with that, thank you. We'll introduce our staff. If we could skip forward to, I think, the 4th slide. One more, yeah, here we go. All right, so I'll just say kind of who we have in the room. A few folks will be speaking and welcoming later, but we have our Deputy Director of Federal Financial Assistance, Jeffrey Ross, Jessica Hayes, who you saw earlier, myself. I believe Josh Standinghorse, our Senior Specialist of Tribal Affairs, is also on the line. Tanua with LISC will be speaking later. And then from Northern Circle Housing Authority, we have Elizabeth Elliott, their Executive Director, and Mariah Miguel, who spoke earlier. Next slide. With that, let's have a warm welcome from Jeffrey Ross.
Hello, everyone, and really excited to see all the participation. And quite honestly, I'm really excited to listen and learn from you all today as to how we here at HCD can really be of assistance and service to you all. And whether that means we're helping to direct funds on your behalf, or if that means that we're helping to match make with folks that can do that work as well. We just really are interested to understand how we can continue to partner and really serve the broader tribal community and to do it in a very meaningful way. So thank you for all taking time out of your busy days and being a part of this discussion. Thanks.
Next up, Elizabeth.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Elizabeth Elliott, the Executive Director of Northern Circle Indian Housing Authority. And we are just serving as a technical assistance partner with HCD. We launched our ERAP program officially on the 18th, and we're looking forward to partnerships and supporting our consortium tribes. And it's really wonderful to see our tribal chairman and the participation from a couple of our consortium tribes on the call.
Go ahead, Jessica.
All right, I'll jump on in. Sorry, I was having a moment with my mute button. So thank you so much for everyone who has joined us. It's really good to see so many folks coming in to listen and hear what's going on and help us share information. So this is really encouraging. So a little bit about the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. We're calling it ERAP. a little bit of an overview. So this is funding that was determined by the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021 that was signed at the end of last year. And it identified funds that were specific to help households that were impacted by COVID-19 in a way that resulted either they were unable to pay rent or were paying a reduced rent, or that had lost employment and that had impacted the stability of their housing. So really the focus and the intent of this funding source is to stabilize households who have rental arrears and who are unable to maintain rents, to make it so that they can take advantage of protections that help them to avoid eviction and help them to maintain their housing and stay housed. I think one of the biggest challenges during the pandemic is that folks who are unhoused are exceptionally susceptible and at a much higher level of risk, and maintaining housing is really the front line to help protect populations as we move forward. Can you jump back a slide? I think I missed something, Francisco. There we go, eligibility. So the eligibility standards set up for the ERAP funding aligns fairly well with most of the HUD resources, I think that a lot of you are kind of familiar with. And that is that a household needs to be at 80% of AMI as determined by the HUD secretary based on the household income for the calendar year 2020 to be eligible for resources. There's also an option for households who have been unemployed, right, or have a documented loss of income due to COVID-19, or that in relation to whether it's directly or indirectly to COVID-19, who can also be eligible for assistance. So the eligibility is fairly broad. There is some targeting. The federal program does encourage targeting to households at 50% or less of earning median income. That really does align with a lot of the data that indicates households that are lower income do have a higher risk of housing instability. One of the things that is important about this is that this program is silent on immigration status, which really means that this is an opportunity for us to help all of our households, all of our partners and residents and community members that do need assistance. And there is no real filter for that. So this is very important for us as we are considering to really take a very direct approach on equity. Equity is a primary concern for us. We want to make sure that programs are delivered with equity in mind. And that involves making sure that we're not discounting people who would be eligible for assistance. Okay, now we can go to the next one. So a little bit more, under the federal program, participating landlords, and the federal program, I will reference that because there is a state program, SB 91, but it really does not apply to the tribal organization. So kind of set that aside and set that kind of over off to the side, because that's not really applicable to what we're doing. So I'm really going to focus on the federal program. In the federal program, landlords can be compensated up to 100% of their unpaid rents during the eligible period. And that really is from April 1st to March 31st. I think in the actual federal bill, it allows you to go all the way back to March 13th, but partial and prorated rents can be very difficult. So we are just kind of rounding to the whole month. But I think that is something that would be something to consider as you're designing your programs or thinking about what your program would need to assist is whether you take a start date on the 1st or start date on the 13th. And so it would really to identify and pay down rental arrears for that period. The program does allow prospective and current rents, but the focus and the priority is rental arrears to help folks come out of the pandemic without a lot of rental debt, which we know can plague households for a very long time and make it very hard to maintain housing and find new housing. The program is intended to have funds go directly to landlords to help encourage funding, to encourage the elimination of that rental debt. So, most of the programs are structured around a landlord preference for payment. However, if landlords are not willing to participate in the program, or if a landlord, for whatever reason, won't accept that rent, payment can be made directly to tenant households. And this provides some flexibility to make sure that households receive resources to help them cover their rental needs. And as I mentioned, rental arrears are prioritized. The state rental program, the state ERAP there is currently housed on the Housing is Key website. We are uploading information as quickly as we can, but we know that it is a lot of information that needs to go up. We're working on getting all of our program partners in place, and as that happens, our information upload rate will increase, and we will start to really roll out a lot more information very quickly. All right, next, there we go. So our program implementation goals, as we kind of designed and worked through our state program, we had a couple of key goals, and these goals were really based on information that we gathered in preparation for this program from other states and local partners, agencies. We did a lot of outreach to try and find out what was working and what wasn't working. And so as we designed our program, we really tried to do that with a mindset of how do we engage landlords to make sure that they participate? How do we message consistently to make sure that households have an opportunity and have the trust in the system to engage with us and ask for assistance? And then how do we structure our information in such a way that it gets to the folks who are most vulnerable and who may not be engaging on the standard communication channels? So as we've kind of designed our program, we've really kept those concepts in mind. And the goal here is to make sure that we've centralized our intake, centralized our the way that we are going to be structuring and operating the program to make it easier for folks to find, easier for folks to engage, so that they don't have to go to a bunch of different places to get the information that they need to engage in the system. We're looking to maximize the impact of funds. As I mentioned, equity is a big issue, so we want to make sure we maintain equity as we're thinking about how we design the program. We want to be consistent with the way that both tenants and landlords are treated, and make sure we avoid inadvertent discrimination, and really get the resources to go as far as we can. We don't believe that we've received enough money to address the depth of need in the state of California. California is a high-cost state, and households have been really adversely impacted by COVID. And so we're working to stretch the money that we have as far as we can. And a lot of that happens through really effective leveraging. The goal is to write down debt so that when the pandemic is over, households can move forward without substantial rental arrears that are going to kind of plague them for an ongoing period. And we're working to maintain good program integrity and accountability. So we're looking to do transparency in the way that we present the program, the way that we work with our partners, the way that we present our information. One of the big challenges, and I know that Northern Circle can definitely speak to this as well, is that there needs to be a balance between fraud prevention, which is important, but also accessibility. So the program has to be available and accessible to the folks who need help, but at the same time, then we as operators, we have kind of a responsibility to make sure that those funds are operated to the best of our ability without fraudulent interference. And that would also mean making sure that we aren't, duplicating benefits, which is a large part of the conversation that we're going to have as we kind of go through what we're doing. And part of why we want to make sure we talk to as many folks who could potentially be operating rental assistance as possible is to come up with a game plan for how we will address the potential risk of duplication of benefits. We want to make sure we help as many people as possible and not have funds get tied up in duplicative efforts. And then, as I've mentioned before, and as is kind of a theme, we're really looking for where we can standardize processes to streamline and make things move quickly. I think, as folks know, the funding was identified on December 27th of 2020, and now it is February 25th, and we're trying to stand up a program as quickly as we can. So, moving as quickly as we can does require some standardization, but we're also looking to make sure that we don't leave anybody behind, which requires flexibility. It's a very challenging balancing act, and it works best when we have good feedback from our local partners who can help us determine when we're doing something right or when we have misstepped. So our implementation timeline, this is a little bit high level. We do have dates pinned down that we're targeting, and we'll let you know what those are. But right now, we are coming to the end of February. We've really engaged with most of our partners and our vendors. We have a couple of contracts still that we need to to finalize, but those will be happening in the next few days. Our goal is to have our statewide portal open on March 15th to start taking applications. And that is really a very aggressive deadline for us, but we think we can do it. I'm pretty confident we're going to make this work. As we lead up to that March 15th, we're going to really start saturating with communication, information, education information, and misinformation, ways to combat misinformation, to help make sure that the communities know what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what their role is and how they can participate. And then also really reaching out to local partners and other jurisdictions who are operating the same kinds of programs, and making sure that we're networking and interfacing in a way that makes sure that we're not duplicating efforts. Once we get past that portal opening, it will be processing applications, ongoing communications, and then what we're calling the feedback loop. And the feedback loop is where we get feedback from our communities as to what's working and what's not. Part of that will be processing our indicators, right? So we'll be watching to see what's happening in the program and where is uptake really good, and where are we potentially having funds lag or uptake lag, and are we having populations that are attritioning out of the application at an unacceptable rate? Are we having areas where there's just not good landlord participation? We'll be evaluating the program performance on a very tight ongoing basis to make sure that we can go in and make adjustments as necessary to make sure our program works. And that's going to be an ongoing process as long as we have funding to push through this program. I think, as folks who've been kind of following the ERAP know, one major challenge with this funding is it has a very tight expenditure deadline. The money has to be completely spent down out the door by December 31st, 2021. There is an obligation deadline in September that we have to meet. And so those timelines for the volume of funding and the need of assistance really make it important that we move quickly, stay nimble, and really pay attention to the performance of the program so that we don't end up with gaps or holes or unassisted communities. And you want to jump to the next one? So some of the key program requirements, and again, these are the federal program level requirements. So at least 90% of the funds that were received through the ERAP are intended to be used for direct financial assistance for housing costs. And that can be housing rental arrears, that can be utilities, that can be other associated housing costs. There's a 10% admin component, and that 10% admin component can also be used to provide housing stabilization services. But the vast majority of the money is to be used in direct assistance. There are, so we talked a little bit about the eligible household, again, a low income household, but then also a household that qualifies for unemployment or that has documented a loss of income. And one thing that's really important when we're talking about this eligibility is that these are not and criteria, they are or criteria. So if a household meets the low income standards, they are eligible. If a household has unemployment challenges, they are also potentially eligible. It doesn't have to be both, right? A household does not have to be both low income and impacted by COVID. It can really be an or. And what that allows us to do is be as flexible as possible and making sure that folks are eligible for the program and assisting as many people as we can. There is some documentation required, although as per the most recent Treasury guidance, attestations can be allowed as documentation. I think, in terms of responsible program implementation, documentation is always preferred, and be that income documentation or identity documentation, rent owed documentation, kind of the different levels of documents that we need to make sure that we know how we're assisting and how much we're assisting and who we're assisting. But provided that extra flexibility, that attestations can be used, that really does help us make sure that even the most vulnerable households who may not have access to documentation can be assisted. We talked a little bit about the non-duplication, but that will mean coordination with our partners to make sure that households are getting assisted as appropriate by the right agency for the right amount of money, and then if there are duplicate applications filed with other agencies, that those are flagged and kind of managed that way. We want to make sure that the money goes as far as we can get it. And then one thing that is good about this funding is that it allows up to 12 months of assistance. So this is more than what was allowed under many of the other assistance programs, which were limited to 3 or 6 months, or that were limited as kind of a one-time effort. Really, the goal here is to look at the range of rental arrears and assist as much as possible with that debt to make sure households can come away from the pandemic without that additional household debt. And then we did talk a little bit that arrears come first. So really looking to get rid of that debt, and then shifting and transitioning over to current and prospective rent payments from there. And it would be both rents and utilities. Utilities are also eligible, and there's a lot of opportunities to target depending on kind of community need and community priorities as well. Let's see. So there's a couple of different ways that an application can be processed. Tenants can initiate an application, or a landlord can initiate an application on behalf of the tenant through the state program. Both of them have their own kind of work path, but they are intertwined because, as per the federal requirements, if a landlord initiates, a tenant has to sign off. And if a tenant initiates, a landlord needs to sign off. There is an option for landlords who don't engage for payments to go directly to the tenant, but the preference is to engage the landlord. Let's see, there are some structured reporting requirements. So, the federal government does want to know how quickly funds are being used, who they are assisting, the basic demographics that kind of go with all of the different federal programs. Those are all called out in the act. And then I talked a little bit about the deadlines. That's 65% of funds that must be obligated by September 30th. That's our first big hurdle, but that hurdle is not too far in front of that final expenditure hurdle. And for the state implementation, we will be looking to actually complete our obligation and expenditure well in advance of these deadlines, because these deadlines do trigger opportunities for the federal government to recapture and reallocate funds. And we know the depth of need in the state of California does not support a recapturing and reallocation of funds. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure all of the money gets delivered to the households who need it.
Excuse me, Jessica, this is Steve. Sorry, I don't know if you already mentioned, are you holding questions until the end or taking them as they come in?
We are taking them as they come in. I just need somebody to interrupt me, and
Okay.
We'll be jumping right into it. In fact, now's actually a good time. I'm about to shift over to Nua and our list partner. So maybe if we want to do a quick round of questions now, that would be really helpful.
So I don't know if you can see these, but Alicia said, for unemployment, does that include those who are now working and are no longer eligible for unemployment, but are still behind on payments?
So that's a really good question. And this is something we've discussed quite a bit, because there's a couple different scenarios there, right? Where a household in 2020 during some period of time was either unemployed or had cut hours, they fell behind on their rent, but now things have changed in their community, they're back into employment, they wouldn't necessarily qualify as low income potentially. We are not using the now to justify the back then. So really it looks at what happened in the period where their arrears were incurred, right? So if a household was struggling with income and there was unemployment during the period of the rental arrears, the eligible period for rental arrears, that is the documentation that will be used to determine eligibility. It won't necessarily be determined on where they are right now. And in terms of income eligibility, we're looking for a lot of ways to streamline and simplify the process, because we know that prolonged income verification processes really lead to program attrition, and we don't want folks leaving the program. We want them to stay with us. So if there are kind of easy buttons, we're calling them, for folks where they have already income qualified for some other form of assistance or some other program, or they were previously income qualified for rental assistance, or they have kind of a one document, we have a list of documents that we'll be looking at that can document that for the period that they were in, that we're addressing, that they had income challenges, then we were looking to do that. And then of course, the attestations would also be allowable. So we're really not looking to make this complicated, but with enough nuance that households don't fall through the cracks. I think that's really kind of the core goal there.
Thank you, Jessica. There was one other question on duplication. So we've heard that a lot of organizations are struggling with defining that. Can you explain it a bit more? And then, it may be an opportunity for Elizabeth to jump in on how they're looking at duplication.
Yeah, and Jeff, if I describe this wrong, I rely on you to flag it and correct me. So really the duplication has to do with the level of need that a household has experienced. If a household has received assistance for a need and the assistance was sufficient to address the need, then any additional assistance will be a duplication. If the household received assistance and the assistance did not adequately address the full scope of the need, and an example of that would be, a household that maybe back in April or May received a flat $1,000 to help assist with their rents, and then continued to have unemployment and will continue to not be able to meet their rents for a period after that. They have an additional need that needs to be addressed. So really, it has to do with how much of the need has been addressed, and that's where the duplication comes in. It has to be nuanced. It really does, because if we don't approach duplication of benefit from a nuanced perspective, households end up with debt. And that is the opposite of what we want to happen with this program. I know that probably wasn't very clear. Jeff, do you have anything to kind of add to that?
No, I think you hit it on the nose, but to maybe simplify it a little bit more, right, is that if somewhere in the last year someone received some sort of assistance that went towards a rent payment, we have to capture that amount, and that needs to be deducted from the total amount of rent that they would have owed. And then the difference of that rent is what is eligible for this program.
Thank you. I will say the duplication of benefits, and this is true from CARES Act also, has been one of the most challenging components of operating these emergency funding sources. I don't know if Northern Circle would agree with us, but it's been really hard for us to wrap our heads around that, and to help our partners wrap their heads around it also, so that we can do this responsibly. But it is something that we're watching very carefully to make sure that we meet the need and don't leave folks unassisted.
Jessica, I do want to say, sorry, in the most recent frequently asked questions, and I have a feeling that potentially this might come up, is that there was concerns that if you were already receiving a housing voucher, similar to all of our rental assistance programs through IHBG, prior to the frequently asked questions released on the 22nd, there was thoughts that it would be ineligible. However, if you all go to the Department of Treasury's most recent FAQs that came out, it is eligible to use ERAP funds to pay for the tenant's portion of their rent. So you could potentially use your IHBG voucher for that household and then incorporate ERAP to cover the tenant portion. I thought that was one of the really awesome things that most recently came up, and actually is not a duplication of services according to the frequently asked question.
Right, and that's really consistent with kind of the way that we're approaching that duplication of benefit, where it's based on need and need and assistance in the balance. And if there is additional need that has not been met, then we don't have a duplication. But yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That was nice of them to get specific in that guidance.
Just added the link to that. I'm sure folks have it, but it's just nice to have it at your fingertip. One more question. Are we required to get a W-9 from landlords and issue a 1099?
So I am not a tax expert, but I believe the answer is yes. and that there are certain tax implications that are kind of resulting from this payment to a landlord. And so this is one of the things that we are kind of relying on our vendor partners to help make sure that we get right, but we're also interested in talking with our community partners on how you are rolling this and implementing this to make sure that we're as consistent as possible.
Right. To add a little bit to that, because we're not tax experts, and who knows what the tax law will say this year. Maybe they might have some things that we don't know about. But generally speaking, this is rent revenue for a landlord, and that is taxable income. For the tenant, it is not taxable income. And to any portion of rent that would be written off in any type of program implementation, then that has potential tax implications, such as, oh, now I'm drawing a blank, so sorry about that. But it's where you take a loss on the property, things like that. So there's lots of different nuances depending exactly how the program is being implemented, who's receiving the assistance, and how they're receiving the assistance. So it really does need to be looked at with that lens. We have not dived into it to that level, but we do know, generally speaking, as a landlord, it is a taxable event. As a tenant, it is not a taxable event.
Jeff, I would agree with you there, particularly because the frequently asked questions does state that within the data that should be collected does include the landlord's name, address, social security, tax ID number, or DUNS. So yeah, what we've done is incorporated into our policy and guidelines that the W-9 is required.
Tawny or Jessica or Jeff, one thing too that we found out for the partners on the call that have low rent units that are serving as a housing authority, that you are also eligible once qualified to assist your tenants in the landlord capacity and have your tenants go through the application process and get qualified to assist them with rental arrears, or if they're in the qualifying situations now, to assist them going forward.
Yeah, and that's something we're trying to build into our system as well, is some flexibility so that, while we are prioritizing arrears, if a household has applied and they have ongoing need, they only have to apply once, and then we can pivot those applications to make sure that we're really making this as easy as possible for folks, because I think, doing something multiple times it's hard, and folks will fall off. They will fall off the radar if we make this too difficult for them.
Great, thank you. Those are great questions. I don't see any more, but please feel free to add more to the chat. We'll have some time at the end to dig in a little bit more.
Okay. Jessica, you good with me moving on to the local partner network?
I am. So this is Tanua. Tanua is going to talk a little bit about the role that the local partner network. I've barely even touched on it in kind of the overview, but I'll let her kind of set up the framework and get into the details.
Great. So again, I'm Tanua Thrash-Intuk, and I'm representing the Local Initiative Support Corporation here for today. The state has engaged us to work with those jurisdictions and tribes that determine that the state will help to deploy their funds, to really be able to provide you with resources to reach out to parts of the population that need additional assistance in getting to the portal and successfully completing an application. Currently, we are looking to provide that support with what we call our 3-tiered strategy. And so we're looking for organizations at the tier 1 level who will be promoting the program, going ahead and letting people know that the program is available, what some of the eligibility guidelines are, and really using their networks to be a trusted voice for the community. Second, we're looking to identify organizations who are able to help us really reach households where they are. Some households, may need, because of disability, because of transportation access, because of remote status, assistance with gaining access to the portal. So we're looking for nonprofit and community partners that can help us actually go to doorsteps and reach out to key communities to get folks into the portal. And then we're also, the third tier is really those organizations who may have more of a hub location. And for those members of the public and of your community who are able to reach that hub, they can come in for COVID safe appointments and or drop off some of their documentation that needs to be uploaded to the portal. And someone on that staff or that team would be there to help upload that information. So those are the three areas. And if you are part of the state's program, we have an application that's live right now, which you're welcome to take a look at to learn more about some of the questions that we have and better details on what we're hoping to gain. A key part of the conversation, though, as well, is to get feedback from you in terms of understanding what might be needed for the tribes. We do intend for regular feedback and conversations with those who are part of the local partner network. And our first meeting will be on Monday, March 1st. So, if you miss that, that's okay. We'll continue to onboard and bring groups up to date because we'll be selecting organizations on a rolling basis to reach key populations. So this really, is kind of the background. We believe that a successful implementation of this program is going to require, really on the ground assistance to help applicants reach the portal. And our goal is really to reduce the barriers of participation by making sure that the access to opportunity is, at your doorstep, in your language, and with people in your community that you trust. So those are some of the elements that we're using when we think about how do we make sure we reduce the barriers and encourage as many eligible households to participate as possible. So I talked a little bit about the fact that we will be selecting those partners from across the state and within, communities who are able to provide that assistance. We will be providing not only that regular feedback opportunity so you can get, up-to-date information on what's happening in your market, what's happening with applicants, what's happening in the community, but also to learn more about what's, any new updates that are coming out. And then we will be assigning staff so that you have somebody who's able to respond to you pretty quickly. So we'll have a team of what we call our local partner network program officers who will be able to assist if you need something in language or are hearing and seeing something that you want to make sure that the state is aware of. So those are all of my slides for now. I'll turn it back over to Jessica.
Keep losing my unmute button. There we go. Thank you, Tanoa. We appreciate that. So I think, right before we can jump into some of our questions, I think a little bit of context for this. When the state of California rolled out our statewide program, we have a list of what we call them non-entitlement, but there are more rural jurisdictions that are kind of default. They're in the state program. This is who we're going to serve. But we also offered it up to our larger jurisdictions, our more populous counties, for them to opt in to the state program as well. If they wanted to have the state operate their program on their behalf with funds kind of dedicated to their geographies, that we would do that. And so, we've got a number of cities and counties on top of our rural partners who are going to be opting in and working with the state to implement their program. And because this is an opportunity for us to kind of leverage resources and to provide consistency, recognizing that a lot of tribal organizations have got, they've got a game plan for how they would like to approach the ERAP. I know that Northern Circles, is already underway. They've got a lot going. They've made a lot of progress. They're ahead of us. But also recognizing that some tribes, just like a lot of communities, are having capacity issues with the amount of money and how to process money, that we wanted to make the same offer to the tribal partners that we made to our jurisdiction partners. that if folks would like to consider engaging with the state and having the state operate their funding for them, for their population, that this was something that we would be happy to talk about and see if it's a workable opportunity. Similarly, that if a big part of this is not just that the state's the only answer, that if there are opportunities to help connect partners and help folks kind of talk about their different options and maybe leverage resources together, that we would be happy to facilitate that and really coordinate and provide as much information and support as possible. We're in regular communication with the Treasury, as I'm sure some of your representatives are also. And so, making sure that we have a flow of information and, hey, did you see that this dropped or that dropped? Making sure that information keeps moving. I think that's to both of our benefits and really helps us all kind of engage in this program and really help and meet the goal, right? And meet the mission, which is to help as many people as possible. So that's just a little bit of context. It is an absolutely voluntary option. It was just, we made this option to our jurisdictions. It seemed right to make this option to the tribes also, if they were interested. That said, I think we can jump on into our questions. Tani, I need to go off some camera and cough for a second. Can you take lead on that?
I got you.
Thank you.
Okay. So with that, our program put together some questions just to start the conversation. If you have other questions or ideas, really scratch, rewrite, what we're doing. We're coming from the place of trying to be supportive, and what that support looks like is obviously based on each individual tribe's needs. So a couple of those questions include, do you want to share with us what you're doing in your community in response to the ERAP funding? Would you mind sharing with us what you perceive as the greatest barriers and challenges to participating in the program? Are there specific organizations that you think we should be reaching out to that would participate with LISC in the local partner network that have more of that cultural competency and that tribal knowledge and experience that would support tribal applicants, regardless of, where they're located? So then there's, does this program and I needed some water too. So does the ERAP program information we shared today does it clarify options for your particular tribe's needs and capacity? How so, or if not, and what more would you need for us to know to support you if you are looking for support? So that's a lot to consider. I have some sharing in the chat. I don't know if Northern Circle, if you want to share kind of your thoughts and how you've approached this, or if we just want to open it up to whoever's comfortable sharing.
Yeah, Tony, we'll be happy to kind of kick off the conversation a little bit. As everyone's well aware, this program has rapidly evolved just in the last few weeks with the first frequently asked questions and then the most recent one that came out on the 22nd. And one of the things that we felt was an absolute need before we could really start launching and really diving into obtaining applications from our community members was to have a policy in place. And that's one of the things that the most recently FAQs had mentioned, what's in your policy, what's in your policy, have it in your policy. So we worked all day really brainstorming as a team in order to create a policy where not only are our staff aware of how to implement the program, what documents to obtain and how to do so. So we've really been successful in reaching out to our community members by utilizing our Facebook page and updating our website with the application and guidelines. We had a little bit of concerns about how this program is really going to kick off and for tribes with perhaps not as much capacity to really administer the ERAP program, that's kind of what led us into wanting to create this partnership so much, right? How can we ensure that tribes get the help they need so that they can either focus their attention elsewhere and let another opportunity to issue and administer their ERAP programs, or how can we help to build their capacity and let them feel confident in administering the program on their own. And one of the things I would like to say is please do not hesitate to reach out to your tribal partners. Northern Circle is more than happy to assist anyone in preparing documents or just discussing the program, and maybe even offering a little bit more information on how we're administering the funds internally. We are more than happy to speak with you all. And even if there needs to be an opportunity where a tribe would like to opt in to this opportunity with HCD and Lis, we're happy to sit at the table as well and help to get all your questions answered, and to feel like there's someone in the room that understands your situation and is perhaps going to be a partner to help communicate and bridge some of the gaps between communications with tribes, TDHEs, and the state. So again, we're very happy to help, and thank you so much, HCD team, for offering this opportunity today.
Connie and Jessica and Jeff, there's a great question in the chat of how you, or if you've thought about it at this point, will there be a tracking system within that portal or within the program setup to track duplication? That was a big obstacle for us, and it's hard because you need to be able to both verify that they haven't received those services or received services, as Jessica said, and the need is still current. And that's just a tedious part of this program that we found, but maybe we can hear what your ideas for that would be.
So that's one of the purposes of this discussion today, is to understand what the tribes will be administering, if they are interested in partnering with the state, and if so, what that partnership would look like, because we all have to deduplicate. The state will absolutely have a list of who we serve, and through that we have communities that are under the state's program that have been doing rental assistance prior to this funding become available. And so we are capturing that assistance that was provided in these partnering communities and making sure it's part of what we look at as part of the process to make sure that we do duplicate. Now, what we have to try to navigate is that if the tribes are going to be operating their own separate and apart program, which is completely fine and no issues, we would want to, and one of the questions we're looking to ask is, are you a tribal member? And if so, we would then be potentially we could refer that individual to a specific tribal program. We could also be looking at asking that next level of question. Okay, if you're a tribal member, have you applied for or received assistance from a local community, program or organization to include a tribal government? We still are trying to figure out how much should we ask? How deep do we go? Do we refer? Are any tribal governments going to be interested in partnering with state? If so, then how do we incorporate what the tribe might have been doing prior to this, and then having that as part of our screen? So there's a lot of different ways we can do it. So to make a really long, rambling answer a little bit shorter, is that's really what we want to understand is how would you all want us to be trying to engage in that space?
And I'll piggyback on that just a little bit, that this is kind of this is a challenge on several levels for us. You know, we are working with a lot of jurisdiction partners where they are operating their own program also, and we need to build this functionality in for them as well. So this is something that we're looking to build and to develop into the way that we're going to operate our system. But feedback really helps. And so, you know, if folks have ideas or thoughts on this, I think this is something that we would really, you know, are open to consideration as we design what we're trying to design and try to operate it, and recognizing that it is a challenge for all of us.
So are there any concerns with the type of language that Jeff just mentioned about asking if someone's a tribal member, or some of those follow-up questions? Like, is that the best, you know, a good way to do that when folks are applying to our program? So we can do a referral. Do you want referrals?
I think the question more so would be, how are you going to verify tribal eligibility? So when you have those questions, those leading questions, just to protect the tribes and make sure there's compliance, do you have any ideas about how you will approach eligibility for tribal enrollment for those partners?
Right, so again, this comes to how tribes may want to engage with us. So it could be as simple as, have you registered with a tribe? If so, you know, we would just then maybe have a drop-down menu of all tribes operating the program. And if that individual sees the tribe that they've registered with, then they could click on it and maybe be referred directly to that program, right? So, I mean, I'm just giving an example. We haven't done any of that type of setup, but it could be something like that. I get, you know, again, we're trying to be sensitive to how best to ask the question, how to make sure that we are partnering and supporting and not getting in the way of a program if it's going to be operating. So try not to have too many assumptions and really just trying to understand how best to do it.
Great. Well, if folks want to raise their hand or share information on any of the questions that are listed here, maybe you can just share with us where you're at with implementation, or areas where you know, there's not a lot of clarity around program requirements, or maybe what some challenges are that you have. And we've identified a couple that we're seeing, but maybe there's others that we're not aware of that might be something we can talk through or support or share knowledge.
So since I'm always uncomfortable in silence, I'll share a little bit of some of what we've heard from some of our tenant advocacy partners. We did meet with them yesterday, and they brought to us a long list of kind of challenges that they've experienced, especially when trying to assist the most vulnerable households. And some of those include, you know, households without a dedicated address, which makes it very hard to kind of map or track by geography, which is kind of a core function for us. Also, households who don't necessarily know who their landlord is or don't have landlord contact information. You know, we perceive that to be kind of a challenge if you're trying to really engage your landlord. And so I know that that's probably systematic across all of the different programs. And if folks have any kind of insights on how you've addressed that, we would be really open to suggestion. And then I think that today we heard from the landlords that they had sort of a similar issue where landlords may not have current contact information for their tenants. And so, you know, making sure that we collect information and get as much as we can, but not create an obstacle for folks engaging in the program is really important.
Connie, you have some more questions in the chat. I saw you responded to one. As Mariah said, Northern Circle is happy to provide examples of our policies, what's worked for us. And then you have a second question about do property management companies qualify as landlords?
So they are not landlords because they don't actually own the property, but they can be a landlord's designated entity. I think for us, in the way that we are going to structure our program, is that we would look for some sort of confirmation or official designation, so that a property management is operating on the behalf of the landlord with the landlord's knowledge and permission, because we want to make sure that we maintain as much fidelity in the program as possible. Jeff, did you want to add something maybe to that?
No, I think that's correct, is that we're looking to make sure that we can document that a property manager is the appropriate entity to receive rental funds on behalf of the actual property owner, i.e. the landlord. And then we can enter into that type of payment structure to send the funds to the property manager, who then is collecting those funds and taking care and showing within the record that the arrears are being wiped out if there's any unpaid portions, depending on how a program's set up. Under the state program, we pay 80% of the unpaid arrears, and then 20% is expected to be basically written off by the landlord. And that's in part because there's somewhat an expectation that any given year a landlord probably has some unit turnover, and if you have unit turnover, while your possible rent is 100% of the entire year, your budgeted rent with turnover is usually around 90%, right? So it gets into this complex math formula. But anyways, you have an 80-20 type of arrangement on the state program, and so a landlord then writes off that last 20%. So that would need to be documented in the program as well. So it is that level of accounting for all of the arrears, what is paid and what is being asked to be forgiven. That is part of the formal arrangement, whether it's a property manager or a landlord, that must be accounted for us to be able to disperse the funds within our program.
And I'll say that 80-20 split is part of that SB 91 structure that impacts the way that the state funding is operated, but tribal funding is not impacted by that. So the 80-20 wouldn't necessarily apply to a tribal program that might engage with the state to leverage resources. But we would still expect the same level of kind of documentation and confirmation of who has the authority. And I think that kind of ties into one of the questions I saw about subleases and who would be paid in a sublease. So, typically when you in a sublease scenario, you have a tenant who is subleasing to another tenant. The key would be to make sure that the landlord was paid, because the landlord is who has the authority to evict on that property. They are the owner on that property. So subleases are very challenging, and I think that that's something that I would love to know, Northern Circle, if you guys have got kind of a game plan on how to approach that, what you're doing.
Yeah, Jessica, I kind of want to hit on both questions. The first one being the property management company. One of the ways that we are, and hopefully this simplifies it for tribes out there, one of the ways that we are going to be administering the funds to landlords and property management companies is almost identical to how we do our subsidy checks for our rental assistance program through IHBG. So, I would definitely suggest going through your policies related to your rental assistance program, and maybe even incorporate some of that language into your emergency rental assistance program policy manual. The next thing is you're probably getting tired of me referring to the frequently asked questions, but I'm telling you, that's going to be your Bible. On the one that was released on the 22nd, question number 5 specifically talks about sublessors. So go ahead and search there. There is information. Jessica, you're right, spot on as far as making sure that the funds are getting to the landlord. But if you want to look more deeply into how the sublessor relationship is, go ahead and go to number 5 of the frequently asked questions, and it goes into quite a lot of detail, and you're just going to want to be sure that you have that in your policy as well, so that there's a procedure that your staff can follow.
Thank you. So kind of related, like going back to the policy and procedures, since we went back there. Jessica, are there policies and procedures that our team's putting together that we'd be willing to share with other groups? As like
So
example
yeah,
guidance?
so we are, yeah, sorry, I always lose you on you then. So we are working on our program policies, our program procedures. A lot of it will be kind of determined by how our technology is going to work. So, you know, what part of it's are going to be very much staff on hand, and which part of the operations are we're going to try to systematize and mechanize as much as possible. You know, we're expecting a really high volume, at least 1 million applications, if not more. So to the extent that we can make something kind of work for the majority of applications and then have a process to deal with the more one-off scenarios, you know, that's going to be to our benefit. And you're absolutely right. Those frequently asked questions are super helpful, and really appreciate the Treasury's pushing those out as we kind of work through some of the nuance. I think the challenge is that, you know, our program is still in design, and we have partners who have already launched. And so kind of, you know, getting back from folks like, how is it working for you, is really helpful for us. And I would hope that we would be able to engage on this level as we progress down through the program implementation, to hopefully help troubleshoot issues that that might arise as we're working through these funding sources. But yeah, we are working on policies and procedures. I don't know. I think we'd be happy to share pretty much anything that we've developed. I don't know how usable it will be for a locally run program, being that it's kind of designed for this macro level massive volume. But I think for the purposes, you know, if there's stuff that can be gleaned from it, we'd be happy to share a lot of our information. It's still under development, so we'll ask that you give us a chance to get past our draft and internal review stage first.
Great, thank you, Jessica. I'm wondering, we have a few different tribal groups here. Would anyone be interested in sharing what your community response looks like? Jessica, I know it's uncomfortable having silence, but sometimes people have to find their mute buttons too.
Hi, this is Jaime Covarubia from Manchester Band of Pomo Indians. So some of the little things that are going on, I mean, this program is just recently just rolled out for my tribe. And some of the complications is the application process. Just, I mean, as simple as it may sound, you know, I've come across a lot of individuals who will not participate in the program because they don't want to fill out an extensive application. So I'm not really sure how to address this other than try to streamline it in some fashions, but I understand that, you know, we need all this information for the program. So those are like really the main concerns for myself. If they won't fill out the application, then, you know, I mean, I'm kind of at a loss at this point. So, yeah.
So if it's okay, Tani, I'll take that one. For the other tribes and housing authorities on the call, you are allowed to apply as the landlord because as a housing authority. My concern is always compliance. So really, if we're applying as the landlord, I think it's best to have a directive from tribal council to perform that action, and just to have a clear and precise way to roll that out. Mariah may have a little bit more perspective on that. Maybe she didn't hear me. Mariah, do you have any?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Yeah.
The question was about the application process. How can we simplify the application process? And then also talk about applying as a landlord, but making sure that we have compliance and are obeying the regulations and rules to do that.
Yes, great. That's a really great question, because it is really coming up a lot. One of the things that we've been really trying to encourage our applicants and tribal leadership is to inform potential applicants that if they reach out to Northern Circle's staff, they will help them walk through the process. And one of the great things that came up recently is being able to use a declaration of need and write out, your situation, what's going on with your employment, what's, have you lost a reduction of hours because of COVID-19? And our staff is going to be working with these applicants in a way that is sensitive, confidential, and also in a way that they feel comfortable giving their information up. And our staff will be able to, help them fill out the application on their behalf. So it's really involving a lot of hands-on for those households that are in dire need of the assistance. And then next, tribes and TDHEs that have their own housing, what they can do is go through their current rent roll and look at who is eligible. One of the things that we're doing internally is looking at the households that have arrears, right? Who's behind on rent, who's low income, who's potentially in the most recent recertification dropped to 50% AMI because of COVID-19. And we are reaching out to those households and saying, hey, number one, you're eligible. Number two, this is what services we can provide. And number three, let's get you on the program. Oftentimes, because we have that income, we have the documentation incorporated into our files already, we can start issuing payments for these households that are way back on their rent. So, it's just going to be tribal leadership speaking with their housing staff, whether it's at the tribal level or at the TDHE, and really understanding, how they're going to be contacting residents, getting the program out, and having that open communication with leadership so they feel confident that their members are being served.
One question I would like to add for HCD is you have a couple tribes on the call that are impacted by the digital divide. And especially the more northern or the more southern you get in California, you have rancherias, reservations that don't have that access to work with your portal. And so what is the state looking, or excuse me, what is HCD thinking about on how to approach those tribes should they want to opt in with your assistance?
So I think that's a really important point, and that's something we've talked a little bit about. And Tanua, I think, is it okay if I lean on you to kind of respond to this one?
Yeah, so this is our most critical question that we have as part of this listening group, which is we are anticipating that there are definitely communities within the state who have limited to no broadband access. So being able to get to the application is not quite so easy for every household. With that being the case among the tribes, part of what we want to be able to understand is there, what is the form of communication that members are used to, that they trust, that we can utilize in order to get them information about the program, their eligibility, which then can lead to potentially an application. So, very with you on the fact that there are going to be parts of the population where broadband access is not so easy to come by. Looking forward to getting a sense as to what are those typical communication networks that are used. Is it word of mouth? Is it door knocking? Just need to understand that so that we can then provide local organizations with the resources to be able to get the word out that way.
And this is Linda from Manchester, Point Arena as well. I just wanted to comment that we have posted it on our tribal Facebook. I have had some members approach me and ask me questions directly. I try to assist them because the application we were given is kind of like a recertification. So for myself and for elders, I know they're going to be super upset when they have to repeat the information that we do yearly here on the Rancheria. So those are kind of my biggest concerns is, one, you know, we're closed to the public as a tribal office. So how are they going to get the application? Who's going to be able to assist them? We're very short staffed and kind of work staggered hours due to the pandemic. So those are, I think, our main concerns here in Point Arenas.
So I want you, Linda, I want you to think about, so first of all, during the pandemic, Facebook appointments have been a real thing. Urban, rural, wherever you are, we are seeing our partners use that as a way to connect with people who don't have, you know, access even sometimes to a telephone. Linda, I want, if you could think about if you had more staffing, you know, how many more staff would you like to have? You know, when would they be able to work? So we can pay for that. We can pay for the staffing. And if you need to be able to have tablets, that would be an expense that could also be accommodated. So that way you have the staffing, you have the tablets. If you need to make a doorstep appointment with someone, if they're not able to come to your office, then you can do that. And we would, pay for the mileage and, make sure that you don't even have to take the documents away. Literally, they can be placed on the doorstep. You can, talk with the person either by phone or through the door, put key in their information into the portal, take pictures of the appropriate documents, and, you're done for the day. So this is an opportunity to expand that capacity. So that's what we're looking for, is organizations who are willing, who are able, who have the cultural, the language, and the trust of the people in the community to be able to be good partners to help do that.
And I would love to piggyback on that a little bit to kind of back up what Tanua is saying here, is that, we don't need to recreate the wheel. If a household has already been income qualified for another service or for some other purpose, whether it's assistance through the housing authority or some other program, there's no need for us to redocument verification, right? So if they've gone through some sort of income verification, just having documents that they've gone through that, right? A card or a letter or something that shows that they've already gone through that process, that would be sufficient for us to move forward on our documentation, because we don't need to do the same work twice. And to your point, for a lot of folks, they recertify on a regular basis. And so just, showing that they have recertified within the last 6 or 12 months would probably be sufficient for us to say, that's good, that's enough. And we can move forward from there and not have to go any deeper than that. Because you are absolutely right. Folks don't want to enter the same information over and over again. It's frustrating and it's disheartening, and it causes them to give up.
This is Jaime Covarubia. I had one more question. For those that were deemed essential workers that may have had, a reduction in hours or of some sort at their employment, and when they do this application, they see that, directly they really haven't been affected, indirectly they have. So some of my members are like, well, I'm not even going to fill that out because I feel like I don't qualify. Is that really like how we're looking at the program, or are we looking at it through a different scope, basically?
I think we can say with total confidence that everybody has been affected. Either
Okay.
directly or indirectly, everyone has been affected. Everyone knows someone who's been affected. Everyone is, related to someone who's either lost their job or has fallen ill, or has friends or family who has lost their job and fallen ill. So the COVID nexus component that was required in the CARES Act, it's not really in this. It's not really in the structure of this funding. It's really much more about, are you impacted? Everybody's impacted. Okay, so
Right.
now are you eligible? And here's the eligibility criteria. And I think one of the benefits of having kind of this attestation allowance and Mariah, I would really appreciate your insight on this also, is that it doesn't require them to dig up some sort of documentation. For instance, nobody has to go to their former employer and say, yes, my hours were cut because of COVID, because that's going to be a hard thing to get, right? Whereas they can self-attest and say, yes, I experienced a loss of income, and this is what it was, and this is why. And to the extent that documentation is available, whether that would be unemployment or some other documentation, that's really helpful. But making sure that this information that folks have access is really the priority, and they don't have to identify personally how they were impacted by COVID.
Okay, thank you.
Jessica, you hit the nail on the head with that, with those written documents. The attestations are really going to help to streamline. If applicants are able to just write out what their situation is, they've lost hours, they've had to be quarantined because someone in their household had gotten COVID, they're receiving unemployment for the last 90 days, having that declaration of need where they're really writing it out is going to help streamline the process, particularly for those individuals that can't obtain the information or unfortunately aren't able to contact their employer or unable to get a copy of their benefit statement because of the amount of time it takes at Social Security. So hopefully having that in there in your applications are really going to streamline the process. And again, I highly suggest that applicants reach out to the program providers, whether it's at the tribe, at the state, or at Northern Circle. Reach out to the staff and see how they can help to gather that information in the fastest way. I think we are all in agreement that people are in help now, or in need of help now, and need assistance today, and can't wait until the end of the week because that could mean that they're getting evicted. So I agree that streamlining is going to be a huge thing, and being able to reach into your programs, whether it's rental assistance or on-site housing, and see who's already eligible, and having the program administrator reach out to them directly and get them on the program. That should streamline getting checks out and arrears paid. So hopefully that helps a little bit more, Chairman.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, for sharing what your members and what some of the barriers are. Really appreciate that. Helps us understand what, like, you're right, the application, I could see a lot of people, if you're worrying about feeding your family and have health issues or whatnot, that certainly is a barrier for receiving services. Is anyone else, would you like to share what your approach to this funding is, or what some of the challenges are, or maybe even if there's any interest or opportunities we haven't identified that what would really help us is, and we can see if that's something that if you want support that we can do. I know, our favorite silence. It's getting later in the day.
So one thing that might be helpful for folks, one of our partners in this program is a outreach and marketing firm, and they are going to be preparing a lot of marketing materials, including kind of easy access one-page documents and documents in multiple languages. And we'd be happy to share all of that we put together, and that gets kind of dispersed as part of this program to folks. And maybe that would be something that would help to address some of the application concerns, to make it a little bit easier. If folks had a one page that said, for example, before starting your application, check and see if you have these things, or other tools that might help streamline the access.
would folks be interested in if we created, I mean, we're going to create marketing materials, but would that be supportive, or are there certain ones that are more culturally appropriate that you'd want us to work with you on creating?
Tawny, there was a question back when we were still talking about duplication, and the tribe was asking or looking if HCD is able to obtain a list of the tribes that have been awarded and or the partners within the state to help us with communication to prevent duplication.
So we have our the jurisdictions in the state. We have a list up on our website, and I will put that in the chat in just a second. And it has a list of what each jurisdiction received and what jurisdictions were awarded. So we can put that in, and then Tanya, I'll let you kind of finish that.
Yeah, so we've been in conversation with the Treasury, and our contacts have let us know that they plan on posting who were recipients, like in terms of just all of the jurisdictions, and I believe even tribal entities that were awarded. So I think that'll help in terms of the best way to do that, or compile lists of how to contact each other. That's probably one way we could collaborate. If folks like, what is the best way if we get someone and they identify themselves, that we can share our list with you, or know who to contact, or for you to contact us, so that's easy. And I'll leave that out there. You can think about that one. There was a lot of conversation in the chat around how about assisting the homeless population. And then one person asked if there is a way to assist homeless who aren't renters per se. And if that's within the scope.
So the emergency rental assistance program is really targeted to renter households. That said, we do have other funding sources that were from the CARES Act that are really targeted to addressing homelessness, and that would be the ESG program, the ESG Coronavirus Funds, CV. And so we've been working with a lot of continuums of care to deploy those ESG funds, and to make sure that the way we're working with the ESG partners, it doesn't overlap or conflict or create a duplication issue with these ERAP funds. So folks who are looking for kind of that direct homelessness assistance, there's rapid rehousing dollars, and there's assistance for housing placement out of that emergency solutions grant, that ESG grant. And we would be happy to help connect folks with some of the state partners to learn more about how to implement that funding.
Jessica, one of the things that we are implementing in our program is the way we understand it is that ERAP, you can expend funds on other expenses related to housing incurred directly or indirectly because of COVID-19. One of the things that we are implementing is that if a individual is homeless now in response to COVID-19, whether it be, they were living with their grandma's extremely high risk, the individual was working, and unfortunately you can't stay here because grandma can die from COVID, so now that individual is homeless. We are interpreting that we can pay for those relocation expenses. We can aid in getting that individual into a new lease with a deposit payment. So there are ways to be flexible and broad. I think particularly with that statement of other expenses related to housing incurred directly or indirectly to COVID-19.
I appreciate that. So that was not an interpretation that was kind of direct that we were really looking towards, but I think having heard you say it, I'm going to take a better look at it, because if there are ways to help make this leverageable, we want to do that. We also need to spend down our ESG funds. It gave us an expenditure timeline, and we're a little bit behind. So we are
directly
to use those funds.
directly in the the frequently asked questions, number 7, it does state such expenses include relocation expenses and rental fees if a household has been temporarily or permanently displaced due to COVID-19 outbreak.
Yeah, that's really helpful. We'll have to take a look at that. I think, you know, we have these multiple funding sources and these duplication challenges, so we want to make sure we address that. But that's really helpful. We'll take a deeper look into that.
Any other questions or thoughts?
How can the tribes on the line get to know you better? We know that you have some fabulous home projects, and because of AB 1010, there's a lot more that we can collaborate on. Who would be the best to get a hold of to explore those options?
Great question, Elizabeth. Thank you. So yeah, we have a variety of different programs, and so as a tribal liaison, myself and Josh Standing Horse, we both are great first contacts to our department. If you're just kind of, you know, like you have different housing related needs and you want to explore which of our programs might best fit for you and how we can help connect you with the right contacts within each program. We're both happy to do that. I can put our emails in the chat. We also have a shared email box called ciap@hcd.ca.gov, and that's our program team. That's going to be our technical assistance that will provide to tribes as a part of AB 1010 implementation. But really, we're, you know, if you need anything, you don't know who to talk to or how to navigate our department, or you're not sure if our department covers it, or, you know, need help getting in contact with another department, we're happy to be a partner and help you navigate that. Or, you know, we all know that the state and other departments, these are complex organizations, and they're not they're not easy to navigate at times. And so if there's an obstacle, you know, oftentimes we're able to kind of shake things loose a little bit. And we can connect you with program staff. So the program staff here, they have their contact information on the program. So if you're interested specifically in this program, you can go straight there. You're welcome to copy myself or Josh, you know, just to have more eyes on your requests so we can best understand your housing needs and how we can support as a department. Also, I think you might have been giving me a softball for this. We've been creating a tribal listserv. And so a number of folks that we've partnered through or have had interest through these listening sessions we've held have opted in onto our list. And so if you would like to opt in on that list, you'll only get information about tribal specific events. So like this is a listening session for this program on how we can strengthen our partnership with tribes. We also do those before we release a funding opportunity in each program. And then there's usually a tribal specific workshop that the program will hold. And then there may be other technical assistance opportunities for each of our housing programs. And so that could look like office hours where multiple people can share information about how they want to use a certain funding program. Or it could be individual TA conferences, which some of our programs do offer. So those are the many ways. Thank you, Francisco, for putting our emails in the chat. So if you would like to learn more or be on the listserv, you can reach out to me, and that would be great. We'd be happy to partner with you and answer your questions.
Tawny, I would also like to mention that the task force that meets quarterly,
yes,
you know, there's definitely an opportunity for tribes to participate in that as well.
Yes, thank you, Mariah. So Elizabeth and Mariah are very active members of our quarterly tribal working group this is a group that's of different tribes, tribally designated housing entities, and even associations for tribally designated housing entities that are provide feedback to us as we're making changes to our programs and sharing our strategies to support tribes. We can share information, and if you would like to join us at those quarterly meetings, you're welcome to. Our last one was just on February 18th, and so I think our next one's in May. It's the third Thursday of, staggered months, from 10:30 to 12.
I had one more question. This is Jaime Covarubia. What about the individuals that are actually homeowners that have mortgages to pay? Does this program also help them?
So mortgage holders,
Unfortunately,
yeah, go ahead.
nope, you got it, Jessica. You got it.
Yeah, mortgage holders are not eligible under this funding source. Although we're watching additional funding that's looking to come down from the federal government, possibly as soon as next month. And that does include mortgage relief, but it's not out yet.
Okay, thank you.
Just checking to see if I missed any questions in the chat. Oh, okay. Thank you for sharing your information. I will add, yeah, you're welcome to put it in the chat too. I'll capture that if you'd like to join. And then, does anyone see any other questions we may not have answered yet? Or that we can recap?
Just a note that we will want to send these slides out to folks after this. So we'll send a copy, a PDF of this slide deck out to everyone who's on this call. We really appreciate you guys attending and helping us think this through and give us a little bit of additional insight. It's really helpful.
Thank you. So Jessica, is this email here, erap@hcd.ca.gov, if a tribe is interested in exploring what their specific support, if there are things that we talked about today that were interesting, or even if we didn't, is that the best way to reach out and start that conversation?
It is, absolutely. Yeah, so just contact us through that email, and then we'll kind of filter that through and be responsive and get back to you as quickly as we can to kind of figure out if whatever next steps would be. And if folks have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. You have a really good, very knowledgeable partner in Northern Circle and Elizabeth and Mariah. So, they're definitely a wonderful asset. And, if we can help it and support also, we're happy to do what we can.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Mariah and Elizabeth, for being fabulous co-hosts. Thank you for sharing your email, your time. I know that you are stretched in a lot of different directions, but you always seem to make time to be, leaders for the tribal members and tribal communities. And so I'm very much honored to be able to work with you this closely. And I'm so appreciative of all the chairs and tribal coordinators and folks that were able to join us today and to share your experiences, your questions. I'm very grateful. Yes, so if there aren't any last questions, we have a few more minutes before the end of the hour, but I know folks want to eat dinner too, so. All right.
I don't have any questions. I just want to thank you and your team over there at HCD and Northern Circle for hosting this. There was some questions that I had, but obviously other people had asked those and they were very helpful. So I have a couple changes to make tomorrow on my application. So, but thank you guys for all you guys' feedback, questions, and comments and everything. I just want to say thank you.
Thank you for joining us. I'm glad the questions were helpful because I know if one of us has the question, we all have the question.
Right. Thank you guys.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. You know how to get a hold of us. Thank you again. Have a great rest of your evening, and looking forward to working with you.